Hi, and welcome to my channel. I'm Leilani for Chavez, and I'm a relationship and parenting coach. And today we are going to talk about relationship goals. You know, that hashtag relationship goal thing that was going around for a while. While the hashtag may have faded, maybe a little bit, there's still this idea that there's this goal in your relationship. So let's talk about them today. Now for this one, you're going to need to grab a pen, paper, pencil, whatever you want to use, and write some things down because I'm going to ask you to reflect and write down your answers. Yeah, pause the video now, go get that and get ready to do some work. So let's take a moment and I want you to just think about the love story you admire the most. So think about it, take a minute. Don't just think of the most current one because that tends to be our habit. Whenever we're asked a question, we think of whatever comes the quickest, but really stop for a minute and think about the greatest, the one that you admire the most, the one that you secretly are dreaming of. I want you to think about that and then write it down on your piece of paper. Pause the video so you have time to write it out. So looking at what you wrote down, I want you to think about that story. Now remember, this story doesn't have to be popular. It can be a story that only you know about. But what about that story is something that you admire about it? What about it really stands out to you? I want you to write down those specifics. So I'll give you some examples. For example, if your story was Cinderella, let's say you admire the story of Cinderella, you might say, I love how it changed her outcome. I love that it has a happy ending. I love that he came along and rescued her. If your favorite love story is your parents, what do you love about their story? What stands out? I want you to write that down. So again, pause the video and write that down. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to pause the video one last time, but I really want you to take a moment and write out the story as you remember it. So write it out. What happened in the story? How did it happen that they met? What happened in their relationship? What are the things that stood out to you? What is the love story? Write out the major points. Now, I don't want you to write a whole book, but write out the major points so that you are able to see it before you. Pause the video now. So why is this important, you may ask? Leilani, why are you making me do all this homework? Well, the reason why is that it's always a good thing to see it before you, to write it out. It's all in your head, but sometimes it's great to just bring it out and put it on a paper so that you're clear on what it is you are admiring. The second thing is that it's really important to know what you're admiring because you may be unconsciously creating these things in your life and you don't realize it. What do I mean by that? Well, depending on the storyline, it might be helpful for you to try to mimic the relationship, but sometimes and oftentimes what I find is that the storyline isn't actually as you remember it or how you idolize it, and your partner is not clear on the storyline, and so they may miss their lines. They may not say or respond the way that you are romanticizing it in your head, and so therefore it causes conflict in the relationship. Here are some examples of what I mean by people who idolize a relationship, but it often cause struggle or strife or conflict in their relationship. So there was a young man who he was in a relationship that had progressed to the point where he felt that this woman was marriage material. He had proposed to her. He was actually engaged to this woman. But yet he was constantly reaching out to another young lady and trying to build intimacy with her and talking to her about things he didn't talk about with his fiance. He was trying to spend time with her to kind of build a relationship. And so we had to talk about that to see what was going on there. So after talking with this young man about what was going on, we got to the point of what is his love story that he admired. And he talked about his parents, and his parents had been married for a long time and happily married, but he talked about how they got together. They had met at a wedding, someone else's wedding, while they were engaged to other people. They had broken an engagement to be with each other and yet found happiness. And so while this young man looked to them as, role models, and he admired their love story and admired the marriage that they built together, he was idealizing how they met as well and unconsciously trying to create that in this situation he found himself in. So while he wasn't trying to intentionally hurt his fiance, he was creating this scenario. He was setting up a scenario so that this love story that he's always idealized could possibly happen. Here's another example. There was another young lady who was married for quite a long while, and she was doing everything in her marriage to push her husband away. She was doing things like verbally, emotionally, and even sometimes physically abusing him. She was doing things that, if anyone was looking from the outside, it looked as if she was trying to provoke him to divorce her. But upon talking with her and uncovering the love story that she idealized, she realized that she had always loved the relationship between her aunt and her uncle. And the words that she said were, he loved her through everything. And so unconsciously, she was trying to give her husband the everything, the good and the bad. She was making sure that the bad could come and that he would love her through it all, so that she would have this idealized love story. It's important to realize the stories we tell ourselves. It's important to realize what we admire about it. It's even more important to realize when we start to idolize it, because it seeps into our unconscious and we start to act out of that belief and out of those things that we are hoping for. So take the time to look at what you wrote down. Is that a story that you really want to idealize? Is that a story that you want to recreate? Is it healthy to recreate that? How about your partner? Is your partner someone who would like to recreate that story? Do they feel the same way you do about that storyline? Do they value the same things? These are questions that you can sit with and ponder and try to get a deeper understanding so that perhaps you can have more enriched conversations with your partner. If you're single, it's good to get clear on what you want and what you're idealizing so that when you are dating, you can ask the proper questions. You can have the proper conversations so that you know what you're getting into and that you're not dreaming up something that isn't there. So how is this love story that you wrote down showing up in your relationship? Do you see it? Are the outcomes that from you trying to create this love story, is it healthy? Do you want to keep it? And finally, is it working for you? If it's not working for you, it's time to recreate a new story. So these are the type of questions that you would go over with a relationship coach. Sometimes I get that question from people like, so what is it that you do? These are the type of questions you would go through. This is the work that you would do so that you can start to examine your own internal beliefs and your desires and see if they line up with the behaviors that you're actually carrying out so that you can have a healthier relationship, so that you can have a happier relationship. I hope today you took a moment to kind of reflect on your love story that you admire and that you start to ask yourself the questions that we went through in this video. I hope today helped. I'm Leilani for Chavez, and I'll see you next week.